On this episode of Money and Power, we talk about Yeezy's wisdom, was Jesus a party man, and Gilbert Gottfried gets a vasectomy? But first, kidding.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on? Yeah. Really ain't nothing I could drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all okay. It's nothing.
Welcome to episode 3 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I'm your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan is Rob Johnson, financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money podcast.
Howdy.
Also joining us from Ohio is Jeremiah Martin, a fireman, a garbage man, and a party man.
Hello.
So we have a really great show for you today. And so first, we're going to do news bits.
News bits. Show me your bits of news.
You guys are out of sync, but I think that makes it work.
Perfect.
Yeah, so one of the big stories that came out of the financial markets this week was the talk of a merger between Sprint and T-Mobile. So a little bit of a backstory. In 2014, these two companies tried to merge, but the deal was ultimately canceled by the Obama administration due to the FCC signaling that they would cancel the deal. So the merger was scrapped, and it wasn't revisited until just this week when, under the new administration and the right-leaning FCC, the $26 billion deal is now a little bit more optimistic. So this would bring 4 major carriers in the United States down to 3. But the purpose behind this isn't necessarily for monopoly reasons. I think it's more so to merge technologies to compete with Verizon and AT&T as they're at a higher level than these two other companies. Signaling from both CEOs, so both CEOs from Sprint and T-Mobile said that the merge would, 1, not lose any more jobs, 2, create jobs for the economy, and 3, it wouldn't increase any customer phone bills. Now, the third point is something I take issue with, that it will not increase phone bills, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. So one thing that this would be good for is if you have Sprint or T-Mobile, the cell reception would obviously be better as the towers from both companies would be merged. And this would be very interesting for Sprint because Sprint historically has had really good pricing, but terrible service. So paired with T-Mobile's towers, I think it's actually a pretty decent deal. And also I think that this would be a better competitor towards Verizon and AT&T. So here's what I think is good and bad. So the good is that this will cause Verizon and AT&T to be more competitive despite what some people in the media are thinking. So I've seen a lot of people comment on this saying this is going to create somewhat of a monopoly and cause prices to go up. I think that's actually wrong because I think it's going to make T-Mobile and Sprint more competitive with Verizon and AT&T, which will drive down prices. The thing that I think is bad is that in this race for 5G technology, which is the primary reason why these two companies are looking to merge, is that the race for 5G is ultimately going to drive all prices up eventually. Because even now with 4G, most plans are capped at like 22 gigs. So it's not necessarily the best thing for consumers if everyone moves to 5G. So I think time's going to tell if this deal is going to be approved or not. And if it's going to be a good thing for the American people. But as it stands right now, I think, at least preliminarily, that has my approval for what that's worth for our listeners.
And as we know, your approval is all we need.
Always.
All right. All right. Awesome. So is this is where it should end, right? I mean, we should, is AT&T going to try to gobble up some other telecom? Or do you feel that this is kind of the end of this kind of arms race in the cellular market?
Yeah, I think there's going to end up being a big 3 of sorts, kind of like with automakers, but not so much anymore, where you have Verizon, AT&T, and then T-Mobile. And then there's going to be some smaller players like Ting Wireless, which is a Canadian company, trying to enter into the market. But I think unless there's a new entry into the market that's more competitive, which I'm not seeing any startups that can compete at this level or even scale to this level, I think it's going to be those 3 carriers for most of Americans.
All right. And who's the dominating company there? Is it going to be a new Sprint or a new T-Mobile?
I believe it's going to be a new T-Mobile. It looks like the CEO, John. I don't have his name in front of me. It looks like the CEO from T-Mobile is gonna head this project once it's all said and done. So you'll have Verizon,
right.
AT&T, and T-Mobile.
Good deal. So we'll have what is it? Red, blue, and pink on the old map there. So
yep.
No
more terrible yellow.
Kind of fits with our topic later on. Anyways, Jeremiah.
All right. So to bring a little bit of levity to the conversation, I found this article came out yesterday on arstechnica.com. So it says iPhone's weirdest glitch yet. Ask Siri to define mother twice. Learn a bad word. The subtitle says, hint, 4 syllables rhymes with other shucker. There you go. So if you said, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I actually just double checked, and this has since been fixed in the last 24 hours. Unfortunately, we can't get a recording of it. Not that we would, but so if you were to say, Siri, what does mother mean, or define mother, she would give you the traditional dictionary definition, and then she would ask you if you would like the next definition. And if you said yes, it would give you a little bit of foul language.
Wait, so this has been fixed?
It has been fixed because I just did it, and it just gives you 2 typical definitions, point 1 and point 2, that you'd find in a dictionary. So it hasn't been confirmed why this happened. Apparently, either someone with a sick sense of humor, or there's some dictionary. I don't know if it was Urban Dictionary or what, that Siri was pulling from to get that second definition. But nonetheless, caused a little bit of humor going through the internet the past 24 hours.
I'm still confused. What's the word?
The subtitle says, hint, it rhymes with other shucker.
So what would that be?
Well,
all right, I'm gonna try this. Hey Siri, what does mother mean?
As a noun, it means a woman in relation to child or children to whom she has given birth. Do you want to hear the next one?
Yes.
As a verb, it means bring up a child with care and affection. Do you want to hear the last one?
Yes.
As a verb, it means give birth to.
Well, that was boring. Okay.
Well, the only thing that I learned is that Siri's not very woke because she didn't say that men can give birth. So there's that.
How dare she?
Right? It's terrible.
Well, are we sure? Yeah, are we sure Siri is a he or she? I mean, we don't know. I don't know.
I don't want to assume anyone's gender.
What is your pronoun?
I don't really like talking about myself.
But seriously, what's your pronoun? Oh, she didn't want to talk. Okay. All right. So she just avoided the issue. Whatever. All right. So my news bit is about Yeezy, Kanye West. So he has caused a little bit of I don't want to say a tweet storm. It's been kind of crazy, kind of 72 hours. And I'm sure it's going to get more crazy. But he has been tweeting a lot about just a bunch of different things, whether it's about kind of conservative issues, whether it's about being a free thinker, has caused a big stink. A lot of people, and we could do a whole At Me Bro segment on just the comments on Kanye West's Twitter. But there are a few things he said that I'm going to touch on tweets that I actually think are a little almost have bits of wisdom in them. So it's go with that. All right. So here are some tweets from Kanye West. All right. So we're in this so-called information age, but we're starving for wisdom. Pretty good. Pretty good in there. We're being starved, and anyone who starts asking unpopular questions gets demonized. Only free thinkers can change the world. There's a silent majority of people that have been silenced for too long. All right. And here's a good one here. We're all kids.
Ever the philosopher.
Art is the escape hatch from oppression. Energy is contagious. We can shape our future. I'm an optimist at my core. I know there will be harmony. And a bunch of pictures, and he has a new single coming out. And all right. So, anyways, that's kind of a glimpse of his Twitter. The big stink came when he posted a picture. He has a signed "Make America Great Again" hat, and he started applauding the president. That kind of caused some people to get unglued, if you will. So it's been very interesting. So I encourage people to go look at Kanye West's Twitter timeline for some entertainment, especially in the comment section. So, have you guys seen this?
So you mentioned Tweet Storm. I didn't follow Kanye West before this. I started following him, and I quickly realized that every day is a tweet storm from Kanye West about anything and everything that just happens to be on his mind at that exact moment. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, I saw it as well, and I thought it was really interesting because Breitbart, who is super right, so far right I can't even see him. They started posting Kanye quotes and pictures, which made me laugh a little bit because it was a few episodes ago that I was talking about how that same organization, whenever someone on the left holds up a celebrity and uses their views to further their position, they're like, we don't care what you have to think. But now that it's someone that agrees with them, now it's cool. So good job, Breitbart. Way to stay consistent.
Oh, yeah. No. So my favorite part of this whole thing, right? So he tweeted a picture, and I'm trying to find it here because his timeline is absolutely ridiculous here. So he tweeted my hero, Emma Gonzalez, who is one of the Parkland students. And he did this after like everyone's praising him for his conservative views, and it's just the comments on this thing are absolutely just crazy.
Yeah, so for me, this brings together actually a couple of things that we've talked about over the last couple of episodes. Number one, as Rob alluded to, this idea of celebrity culture. And both the right and the left are always looking for the next celebrity that's going to agree with their views, and they can raise them up on a pedestal and say, "Ooh, look, we've got someone else on our side." And that obviously can be dangerous, especially when you're talking about someone that has a variety of interesting opinions on a variety of different things, and he, like I said, he talks about them regularly. But the second thing is, we talked about in our topic of whether character matters or not, and what how much character matters in different aspects of our lives and in the political realm. But we talked about, one of the things I talked about was taking someone for 100% of who they are. Right. And I think that this is a perfect example of, okay, we can talk about things that we agree with Kanye about without saying that he is new conservative, pop culture icon. He even said in one of his tweets, he's not a conservative. He's got to look up. He's got to read up on and study to really decide where he fits on that. Now, I think it's a perfect example though of how intolerant the left can really be, because I mean they're just crucifying him. And this is the same Kanye that not too long ago called out George W. Bush and said he hates all black people. So and he was lifted up by the left at that point because this is their hero,
Right.
their cultural icon at the moment. And so it's like, all right, can we as left, right, wherever you're at, can we just look at some of these things and say, that's not a bad tweet, or that's a terrible tweet, without us having to wholesale agree or disagree with the entirety of the mystery wrapped in enigma that is Kanye West.
So Chance the Rapper, so he kind of came to Kanye's defense, and all he tweeted. So this was Chance the Rapper's tweet. All he tweeted was, black people don't have to be Democrats, and he was forced.
What?
He was forced to apologize for that, and he did. He ended up apologizing for that because he offended so many people, I guess, just by that. And so it's now. So I say all that to say is that I do think this is an important cultural moment, because I do think it's going to this is going to allow it to be okay. It's going to give permission to a lot of folks in the African American community to kind of take a second look at what are some of these deeper policy issues. And I don't agree with obviously everything that Kanye West says. I think it goes without saying, but I do think that it is important. This is an important moment, and I think we're going to look back on this as an important moment culturally within that community. That it's okay to kind of question some of this stuff. Even if Kanye West comes to conclusions that are antithesis to conservatism or antithesis to what I believe, I respect the journey, and I respect the journey because I just don't think that a lot of people on both sides of the aisle actually have that journey. There's a lot of people on the conservative side of the aisle that have never had the journey of why do I believe what I believe, and there's a lot of people on the liberal side of the aisle who have never had the journey of why do I believe what I believe. And I think that journey is an important journey to have, and I support it, and I think I think hopefully it sparks that intellectual curiosity in a lot of people on both sides. And I think we've talked about this before. It's not just a matter of reiterating talking points or brief snippets that are easily put into a meme. There are some serious ramifications and just some serious intellectualism behind it. So.
Yeah, Rob and Nathan, are you guys familiar with the Overton window?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is one of the many facets that really just recent happenings in the news that really is as evidence of this idea. The Overton window of discourse. The range of ideas tolerated in our public discourse and rational discourse that we've talked about so often the last couple episodes, and we see it. I think we see it on both sides, but this is a perfect example of if you get out of step with the narrative, with the what is acceptable discourse, you're shunned. Saying something as non-controversial of all people of a given race don't have to believe all of the exact same political ideas. That is a nothing burger. It is as non-controversial as it can get. But that's unacceptable. You've got people reaching out to Kanye and saying, hey man, you're what was it? John Legend texted him and said, hey, you're a hero to a lot of people. You need to be careful what you say. And all he's saying is, hey, I'm working through some things, and I should have the ability to think through these things. And just because I like some things that Trump has said or done doesn't mean I agree wholesale with him. But that's unacceptable in our public discourse, apparently.
Well, and I mean, chalk this up as just bizarro world, but Kim Kardashian as the voice of reason in this, saying that, is it not okay for someone to be able to think a little differently or think through some things a little differently? Um, and it's like, I don't know. It's 2018, everybody. 2018.
It's been a year.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we have a great segment coming up for Meme Busters, where our segment and our look at these wondrous memes that we have. Speaking of tribalism and groupthink, this segment, Rob, Meme Busters, what meme do we have today?
So today we're going to be looking at it's a very brief meme. It's a lady with what appears to be, it's hard to tell. Looks like she's got some multicolored clothing on, some dreads, and she's holding up a sign that says, "Education should not be a debt sentenced." Debt, DEBT, not death. With the idea that college and people that attend college ought not to be burdened with debt should they decide to go and not be able to pay for it.
So let's bust this meme down, Rob. So from the economic standpoint, what do you think?
Well, there's a few things. The first thing that I look at whenever I talk to someone about college education is that, one, tuition has went up 2 to 3 times the rate of standard inflation, which tells me a couple of things. One, because the government is giving loans to students with the complete guarantee that they're going to be covered. Colleges look at that as sort of a free pass. So they do 2 things. One, they hire more administrators that they don't need, and they build more buildings that they don't need. And a byproduct of that is them raising tuition to pay for those things that they didn't need. So it's this vicious circle based on the government giving free money essentially to colleges because, for the most part, these types of loans are non-bankruptable. So that's the first thing.
Yeah. So let me just piggyback on that.
Yep.
So this is the same kind of thing that happened with the mortgage crisis in 2008.
Precisely.
And anytime, so for there to be a free market, there needs to be a free market on both sides, right? So we have to be able to privatize the risk as well as privatize the profit, meaning that a company has to be able to get the full benefit of their risk in the profit, right? Which is why we're opposed to socialism. But at the same time, we cannot publicize the risk and privatize the profit because then that's cronyism. And what we did in 2008 is that we publicized the risk. In other words, we spread the risk amongst the taxpayers, and then we privatized the gain. So meaning that somebody who was in that market could take a lot of risk because they didn't have to feel the pinch of that risk, but they would also feel most of the gains, right? And the same thing is happening in the university system. We've basically publicized the risk in backing and now absorbing student loan debt within our tax-paying structure, and we've privatized the gains. Meaning that the individual colleges don't have any of the risks associated with student loans, but they get all the gains from its tuition.
Exactly. And what we're seeing now is this issue of inflation as it relates to college tuition rates are doing 2 things. One, they're making it so college is inaccessible to families because they recognize the debt burden. And the second thing is that families that don't recognize that debt burden are sending their kids to school, having them take out these massive loans, and sometimes it even extends to the parents with what are called Parent Plus loans. And then once the student graduates, they said, oh, well, the job market isn't as good as they anticipated it to be or as they told me it would be. And now they have this giant burden of debt, which is logical from the progression of events. So what's happening is there's this resistance that's starting where people are saying, well, college ought to be free because it's so expensive. Not realizing that the reason why it's so expensive is because of the government's intervention in it in the first place. So more government, like always, is not the answer to this issue.
Yeah. So, and another way to look at it too, right, is, and I don't think people really understand that, the government is not the answer to this issue. So, another way to look at it too, right, is, and another way to look at it too, right, is, and I don't think people really understand that, the government is not the answer to this issue. So, most student loans are capped at a certain amount per year based off of whether they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, and those rates go up. Most of the debt burden is actually through Parent Plus loans or co-signed loans with parents, and that is becoming a driver of this discussion too, because now you have a lot of taxpayers / parents who are under the knife of student loans themselves. It's not just their kids, and therefore there's a lot of pressure to quote unquote do a loan forgiveness because it's going to help them out as well. It's quite an interesting dynamic. And so, what is the solution then? If we don't want this to be a debt sentence, which, by the way, I don't think college has to be a debt sentence in the term that they're using it. I am okay, and Rob, you might smack me across the face here, but I am okay with student loan debt for a couple of reasons. And I should say in moderation, everything in moderation, but I'm okay with it for a couple of reasons. One, because the standard interest rates for student loans tend to be significantly lower than market rates. And so you can, if you do it in moderation, you can actually have a decent debt load with low payments while you are transitioning to a workforce job. But that said, you shouldn't be absorbing this debt without having an idea of what career you're actually going in to pay for it. Going into, studies of, Game of Thrones characters or some such nonsense as your major isn't going to result in you being able to actually pay those finances back. So you have to be careful when it comes to that. But what other strategies can we implement without just quote unquote making college free for everyone?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to recognize is that if we were to make college free for everyone, and the numbers have varied, but it's roughly a $75 billion increase in the federal budget, which is a lot. And also you don't really know what's going to come of that either, because there's a lot of questions on academic integrity that come about from that as well, which we don't have time to get into here. My solution on this has been mixed because it's a really tough topic because there's so many moving parts to it. On one end, I recognize the importance of education. And because of that, usually my solution is to revamp how we transition kids from high school into college. By and large, we've done a really bad job at teaching our children how to transition from high school to college and kind of letting them make the decision while they're in college, which isn't very advantageous. I think the biggest emphasis needs to be put on kids understanding in their sophomore year, junior year, what college actually looks like and what their game plan is going to be prior to them getting there. Now, how we educate them on that, it's multifaceted. There's several different ways we can do that. But I've always said that if you have a system in place where kids understand what they're going to do before they go to college, then the chances of them taking on an exorbitant amount of debt are much lower. And a good example of this is, this is the common myth, and this could be another meme buster segment, when people say, I'm just going to go to college for 2 years, take the basics and figure out what I'm going to do. Well, the problem is the basics don't last 2 years. Anyone who says that hasn't gone to college lately. The basics usually last for 2 to 3 semesters, which is about 1 to 1.5 years. And the other thing with that as well is different degrees require different basics. So saying you're just going to do the basics is kind of you're putting a Band-Aid on something without actually looking to resolve it long term. I was just having a discussion with someone about this morning. They said the very same thing. And I said, well, at that school, if you transition from nursing to business, your math credits go from needing 1 to needing 3. So if you went from business, 3 math classes, down to nursing, which is 1, you just wasted 2 math credits that don't transfer anywhere on the basics. So there's a lot of detail that needs to be understood before just saying things just to say them because that's what we've always said, because it doesn't help the students. And oftentimes it puts them further behind.
Absolutely. And not to mention that, the percentage of people that drop out of college with a significant debt load just because they can't afford it anymore.
Exactly.
And it really comes down to people just need a plan, and they need to have a plan of action, and we just don't do a very good job of doing a plan along those lines. So, Jeremiah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple points that I, especially agree with. It's this idea that we have been told for so long that that college is important. You need to go to college. You need to make something of yourselves, and that can have a place, but without the proper preparation to get there, that's just go into college because you should go into college without really having any trajectory for a career or for ultimately what's going to give you purpose and meaning in life. And that's a problem.
Absolutely. It is a problem, and so there's also a tension. There's also a tension between, what traditionally we look at as a liberal arts education as being necessary for the development of citizens, and then also the trades. Okay. And there's been a big concerted effort of late to say that, we need to do more in trades and eschew liberal arts education. And I agree that has merits. I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. And I think that some young men and women, would do better in the trades than going a liberal arts route. But I would say that it's a shame because I think a liberal arts education isn't what a liberal arts education used to be. And it's more of just almost state-run indoctrination as opposed to actually creating a well-rounded citizen. And I think that's unfortunate, especially for those of us who believe in intellectual pursuits in education.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I've heard the argument that education is invaluable, and I think the problem with that line of thinking is that I think our culture has conflated the ideas of schooling and education. And so I would agree that education is invaluable. I mean, it is a noble pursuit, and we should all be, educating ourselves and attempting to be, better individuals. And ultimately being able to, better serve our communities and our, and our families, etc. But, once again, the idea of school and education are not one and the same, but they're also not mutually exclusive. And so you have to look at this and say, especially now, I mean, we're in the age of information, the internet age. We have, so many tools at our disposal. When you have websites like Skillshare and Udemy, and there's dozens of them out there where you can get quality education on different topics or even on skills and build your resume, build your skills for little to no cost. I mean, there's also this really cool website. You may have heard of it. It's called YouTube. It's this new thing. It's all the rage. But I kid. But the point is that there's so much information out there. Absolutely, education is invaluable, but it doesn't necessarily have to come with the price tag of student debt. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's in a formalized institution, such as a 4-year degree, that gets you a 4-year degree or gets you a diploma. And so I think we really, as a culture, need to reevaluate these things, and kind of look at, what are the traditional structures, and are we doing business as usual when times have changed. I think that's something we seriously need to consider.
Well, Jeremiah, we're in this so-called information age, but we're starving for wisdom.
I've heard that from a wise man before.
Wow, Nathan, did you just come up with that?
I mean, no, I didn't.
You know,
Yee to yee. Yee to yee. All right.
You know, you guys were talking about the difference in trades and 4-year colleges. There's a quote from one of my favorite movies is Good Will Hunting, and there is a very famous scene. He's in the bar talking to some guy who's just being a total douche, and Matt Damon's character. Can I say that? I can say that, right?
Well, I think you just did.
All right,
so,
perfect. All right, just making sure.
If you didn't say a word that rhymes with other shucker,
that's true.
Then we'd have a real problem.
Yeah. So anyhow, he walks up to the guy and they're talking about, they're at Harvard, and he tells the guy who's being a tool, he says, you're going to wake up one day and you're going to realize you wasted $150,000 on an education you could have got for $1.50 in late fees at the public library. It's like, exactly. And even more so now. We have all these different tools. Another good one that's owned by LinkedIn. It's a subsidiary. It's called lynda.com. It's Lynda with a Y. Just really good educational content. And that's what I know for me, like when we're looking to hire people and we're, those are the things that we look at. It's not necessarily the degree. It's also the skill set that comes along with the person. So it's not just about the 4-year degree or the advanced degree. It's a lot of it is about the education that's built around the person. So there's a lot more to it than just having the 4-year degree. To me, it's almost meaningless unless there's something more behind it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is obviously a larger discussion, and I'm sure that we'll delve deeper into this in coming episodes as well. But Rob, to your point, there's also this idea that someone can get out of school get a 4-year degree, but then have no practical work experience to back that up.
Exactly.
And so, one of the complaints of recent graduates is, well, they need a degree and experience, but they've got to get a job to get experience. And so there's almost they're almost creating this barrier to entry by pursuing, once again, not that education in itself is bad, but pursuing only one type of education and forsaking work experience and forsaking other types of education and other types of growing themselves.
Yeah, that's just because they're too lazy to get an internship. So I'll point that out.
Yeah, and this is another area where the private market has a better solution than the government. A good example is the company I work for. They have a talent pool that is basically entry level, and you work for the company. You're not like a third party or anything. After 6 months, you can start applying internally, and you'll get internal preference. So the barrier to entry is very low. It's not that difficult to get in at all. But once you do, they'll give you like $30K for your undergrad. They'll pay for your master's degree. They'll do everything to turn you into a good employee because they recognize the value in building someone up internally. That's something the government can't do the way private industries and private market can.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, so I think if there's one thing that we've learned in this segment, it's that people need to go to websites like lynda.com or twitter.com/Kanye West and get them some education, get them some wisdom.
Exactly.
100%, because we are all kids, or at least we're dying to be kids, or we're dying because we've lost our inner child. We're dying to be ourselves.
No better way to end the segment.
All right. So on to our next topic. I believe we had this next topic came from some listener feedback from Tony Vance. Jeremiah, do you have that pulled up, or do you want me to read that?
I do. Yeah. So Tony Vance sent us a message on Facebook. And for those following on home, you can follow us on all social media channels at Money Power Pod. And so Tony Vance visited us there and said, question for the panel, is it time America abandons the two-party system? On a related note, is it time for evangelicals to divorce themselves from the Republican Party? So great question, Tony. Appreciate appreciate the question, and so we're gonna delve into that in our next topic.
Yeah, and what we're really appreciative of is that we have more than just Kevin Small as a listener. So that's what we're really appreciative of.
We've doubled.
But I'm going to tackle the first question first. So is it time for America to abandon the two-party system? I think what's important for people to understand is why we have a two-party system. So we have a two-party system because of our Constitution, namely the Electoral College. The Electoral College does not allow for a plurality to be elected president, meaning that you have to have a majority of the electoral votes. So it can't be a plurality. So if there's 30%, 33%, and 37%, as it were, in the Electoral College, then it goes to the House of Representatives and the Senate, respectively, for the presidential vote and the vice presidential ballots. Because of that, that's why primarily we have a two-party system, and we always have. There's always been, even in the ebb and flows of the old Democratic Party, the new Democratic Party, the Whigs, and then to the Republican Party, we've always had this ebb and flow. But then we've always centered around two parties, and it hasn't happened just by happenstance. It's happened because it's actually kind of built into the cake, and that's the reason why. So when people say, should we abandon our two-party system, it sounds great, but the way that our system works and around the consensus, really, that's driving it. And we've seen kind of the electoral pains of having some minor third parties in there, whether it's Ross Perot in 1992, or whether it's the Green Party in 2000, taking votes from Al Gore. You kind of see what happens when these things kind of flare up, much to the chagrin of people they're pulling votes from. And this is kind of why we coalesce around those two parties. But I understand the reasoning behind this, because, like in 2016, the choices were, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But I think that the two-party system has served its purpose, and it's going to, because of that electoral college balance, and that's something that I just don't want to tinker with. But that's kind of the fundamental mechanics of it. I don't know, what do you guys think about the two-party system as we have it?
I think to take it kind of at more of a general view, I think that the issue that some have they don't fully identify with either party, and so they kind of feel lost in this this gray space, maybe in between or right of one or to the left of the other. And I think it's important to kind of have a general conversation about labels. And it's this idea, when the way that our brain is wired is that we as humans, we're prone to labels. It's a shorthand. It helps us understand our world. And so we even use analogies, and we use metaphor to explain complex topics. And we're saying, well, this is like that, and our brain makes the connection to say, all right, this label, helps this apply it to something that we already know. And that's the kind of thing that I see when I think about the Democrats or the Republicans. It's these broad labels that it's a shorthand to get us in the right direction. But now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of different directions within that. I'd say probably more so in the past than currently. But you used to see a lot more pro-life Democrats, or you have log cabin Republicans, and so you have specific cells within the parties that maybe they differ from the party platform on one or two key issues, but the label as a whole gets you kind of closer to the center of what you're actually trying to talk about. So when you're talking about a Republican, you generally know what you're talking about. When we talk about a Democrat, you generally know where you're talking about. But when you take it down to the individual level, there has to be some nuance there to understand. Not everyone who would consider themselves a Republican is going to fit that mold 100%.
Right. Rob?
Yeah, this is one of those topics where I'm not super well versed in the Electoral College and the political dynamics altogether. I have some opinions on it, but I am by no means what I would call well read on the subject. So take all of my opinions with a grain of salt. I think that the main reason this question is asked is because since 2000 we've had 2 elections where the popular vote went to one candidate, but somebody else was elected. And I think people are seeing that. And since there's more of a trend, if you can even call it that way, people are saying, well, is this system even still worth having? Because seemingly the majority of the people don't want this candidate. And that's true in a lot of elections, right? Because less than the majority of Americans voted for, the Bush the second time around or whatever it may be. So I think that for me, I don't have a giant issue with the Electoral College because I understand that it placates better to rural areas and it controls it so the coasts don't run basically the entire country because that's where the population would most be concentrated. So I don't think necessarily we should blow it up. I do think that there is some reform that needs to take place, especially with campaign financing and things along those lines to make it a little bit more transparent, especially in this last election. Here it is 2016, and both the DNC and the RNC came under investigations, and the thing that happened between Bernie and Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and all of that nonsense. There just needs to be more transparency, and I do agree that there ought to be, especially in the debates, more than just 2 views represented. I wasn't a Gary Johnson guy, but I think a party like the Libertarian Party, or like Jill Stein, who incidentally was like a punk rock singer. That would have been interesting. Something like that would at least give people an understanding of a view that has some value to our republic. Somebody like Ron Paul running as a libertarian in 2008 rather than a Republican, and if he would have been able to be included, that would have been interesting. I think just for people to see more views on the political platform.
But here's my issue with that, Rob. The problem is, we're talking about this at a national level. We're talking about this, the founding fathers, what they set up for the entire country and federal elections. But the problem is that's the only time that these conversations are had is because the average person, if they vote, and even that's a small percentage of the population, if they vote, they're only getting out to vote every 4 years in the presidential election. The types of things that you're talking about, I can tell you firsthand because I actually just went to debate for a local congressional seat this evening. And you had 3 Republicans up on stage that had 3 very different perspectives and 3 very different views on different issues. And so when you look at it at more of a local level, you start to see more of those different points of view. But because people aren't engaged on the local level, that they're not engaged when, we talked about this on a previous episode where someone is a state representative and then, goes on to become a congressman and then goes on to become a senator and eventually or a governor and then goes on to run for the presidency. We don't see that process. We don't see those differing views because the only time we're looking at this, the majority of Americans aren't even engaged in the presidential primaries when those important decisions are made, to the point where the only time they're even looking at this is every 4 years in the general. And then I can totally understand the perspective of, hey, we only got 2 options, and maybe they're not the 2 best options, but that's because you weren't engaged in the process 2 years ago,
Absolutely.
or even 6 months ago in the primary. So I part of me just wonders if this isn't a flaw in the system and just a flaw in our engagement.
Yeah, I think
That's where I stand. I agree with Jeremiah there. I don't think it's a flaw in the system as much as it is in the engagement. I look at the two-party system more as a feature, not a bug. That's me. Hey, you were going to say something, Rob?
no, I agree with what you said, Jeremiah. I think for me, and this is only speaking, I'm 27, so I haven't seen a bunch of elections, and as I said, I'm not extremely well versed in politics as a whole. But I think, especially in the last two elections that I've seen, even during the primary process, and you're right, we don't follow enough on the progression of candidates and from a local level to state to ultimately when there's primaries for the general. I just haven't seen a diversification of views. Even when there were 16 Republicans running, you see a little bit, but I think for me, when I look at different parties and what the parties represent, there's a plurality of views that is not there inside of the Republican Party or inside the Democratic Party, and that's wholly
One of the other
subjective.
issues that I see too, and some would say that this is a product. This is a post-Trump world, but I think that this actually was part of the reason that part of what paved the way for Trump was this idea of the messaging that was used, drain the swamp, career politicians. And so we see where people are vilified for being in office for any period of time. You get into office and there's just this claim that you're suddenly you're corrupted by the system, even if you've been in office for relatively in a low level position. But there's this creating of a villain for anyone who's been in office, and so the only solution to that is an outsider. Well, there's a lot of I would say in some cases there's a lot of experience that's lost there. There's a lot that's lost when you come to that. But once again, that is in some ways a product of people not being engaged along the way. Just because someone's been in office doesn't necessarily mean that they've been corrupted by the system. Now, there are people that have been in the system for a long time and out, but that's not a problem with being in the system. That's a problem, to what we talked about a couple episodes ago. That's a matter of character, and those are the type of people that we need to vote out. But you get to the point where you've got 17 people on a Republican debate stage, and just about, with the exception of maybe one or two, everyone has political experience, and they're all being vilified for having any level of political experience, and paving the way for someone, a quote unquote outsider.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. All right. So the second question: is it time for evangelicals to divorce themselves from the Republican Party? So my first thing is, I don't think we're necessarily wedded to the Republican Party. We just have the Republican Party by default. And what I mean by that is, if you're a pro-life evangelical, there's only one party that says you're welcome, and that's just the facts. And go ahead at me on this, anybody. But the Democratic Party has been thoroughly opposed to any kind of pro-life message within its ranks. Period. They've been very hostile to pro-life Democrats to the point that they've left or gone third party at the least. And so, for anyone who holds the issue of being pro-life as a primary issue, that's that's the default. So I don't know it's necessarily evangelicals are wedded to the Republican Party. It's that a lot of evangelicals feel that that's the default. It's the only place they can really go, because of the pro-life issue or the marriage issue, the family issue. And then you compound that then with taxes and the economy, and the autonomy, and just the distrust. And I would say the natural distrust of government that evangelicals and Christians tend to have. Then I feel it's kind of a mixture recipe for that party being the default, even at its worst. I look at it as almost a failure of the Democratic Party to do outreach to evangelicals. Now I've said this a bit, and I've taken some heat from it, but I feel that if in 2016 it was a pro-life governor running as a Democrat, I think we would have had a completely different outcome. But it was literally a choice for a lot of evangelicals, especially those who hold pro-life issue dear. It was literally a choice of either A, not voting for either one of the main two candidates, or B, voting for Donald Trump. And
yeah, it goes back to this idea that one side at least appears to be completely antithetical to our beliefs and to our ideals and to our values, and the other side, at least at the very least, or I'd say at worst, just lets us be, and at best agrees with us.
So that I think, so to Tony, I appreciate the question. That I agree with. If the premise is should evangelicals be wedded to any particular political party, I think the answer to that is no. Just like I don't think anybody should be wedded to any particular political party. I think that everyone should be an independent thinker in there, and I think tribalism is very dangerous. That said, I don't think that that's necessarily what's happening here across the board. I think that there are a lot of evangelicals who struggle with that identity and quote unquote being cast that way. But at the end of the day, to steal a Jeremiah phrase, at the end of the day, I think that it's a matter of being wedded not by choice but by default.
One of the frustrating things for me that I see online is this question, this ongoing debate that sometimes people want to have. If Jesus were alive today, would he be a Republican or would he be a Democrat? And to your point, Nathan, I think the answer to that is neither. As far as being a lifelong member of either party and supporting, just going down the line and supporting one party or the other. However, I do within the Democratic Party platform, I have a very, very hard time believing that Jesus would align himself much with some of the key issues that are ultimately sin and morality issues, specifically abortion and ultimately killing the most vulnerable in our midst. And so people often want to talk about the least of these, and they want to talk about the orphans and the widows. And absolutely, that's a biblical mandate. And I think that there are many public realms where we as Christians specifically and Republicans generally haven't been the best at this. However, when you look at the ideas of economic liberty and the freedom to do with our money as we choose, that's where you see the real freedom for public charity. And or I should say private charity, and for really helping the least of these out. But the most, probably the most significant way that we can stand up for the least of these in our midst is on the topic of abortion. The most vulnerable in our midst are unborn children, and so that's while not claiming that the Republican Party doesn't have its blind spots, they obviously do. One of the major blind spots of the Democratic Party when it comes to, specifically reaching out to evangelicals is this issue of abortion. So should we take care of the orphan and the widow? Absolutely. Should we take care of the unwed mother? Absolutely. But that's not to say that we shouldn't also take care of the unborn child.
Yeah, absolutely. So would Jesus be a Republican or Democrat? Neither. Next question. I don't care. Like that's not even relevant. But what I do know is that republicanism, and that's a small r, republicanism, as far as our country, works best when we have a strong church. And Tocqueville mentioned the fact that we have such a strong church and as an institution in our country as a reason why we had such strong liberties that were allowed to flourish. And that church, Christ and his church, are a reason why liberty has been able to succeed for so many years, because it's an institution separate from the government and the parties that represent the government. And when we have lost that focus, and when we have decided that the government should take the role in the institution of charity and taking care of the orphans and the widows, that's when we have really started to slip on liberty. And so, Christ Jesus would not be a Republican. He also wouldn't be a Democrat. He also wouldn't be for the government just taking over. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's, but we need to deal with our own mess. We need to deal with what we need to deal with. And anyone who preaches otherwise, and anyone who preaches a social justice that has anything but the church fulfilling those such social justice roles, is something that's antithetical to the gospel, in my view. Rob?
Yeah, I think you both have touched on a lot of good points, and all the points I do believe I agree with. One thing that, when people are talking about should evangelicals leave the Republican Party, I agree. I mean, it's not as though it's one unit where if you aren't evangelical, then you therefore are a Republican. And also, let's say you do have a two-party system and people leave, and an evangelical leaves the Republican Party, it's not as though the Democrat Party is so morally sound and on board with evangelical principles, because you said they're not. It's just not the party for evangelicals based on what they're putting out in this day and age. I mean, there's a whole host of topics that would be counter to what biblical teaching is. So I don't think that they're married to any party in particular, but two, it's not as though if they did leave the Republican Party that the Democratic Party would be a logical choice, because it wouldn't be.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So Tony, to Tony's original question, is it time for evangelicals to divorce themselves from the Republican Party? And I would say that if divorce themselves, meaning that there is an individual or a group of evangelicals who just go straight down the party line and check the box simply because there's an R next to the name. Yeah, I think that can be dangerous, or conflating, evangelical with automatically meaning Republican. Yes, that is, that is an issue, and that, yes, there needs to be a divorce there. If that's the case, I'd say the majority of the time, I don't see that. And so, there needs to be a distinction between someone who is an evangelical and happens to be a Republican or happens to tend to vote Republican, versus being, having this unholy with with the Republican Party.
Agreed. All right, so we'll end that there. Great discussion, gentlemen, and I'm sure there's more that we'll touch on later. So to the audience, what do you think? What do you think about those questions? We'd love to hear from you. Jeremiah touched on them a little earlier, but Jeremiah, how can people reach out to us if they have opinions on this topic and other things that we're related to?
Yeah, once again, at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. So, give us a like, give us a follow, and more importantly, engage with the conversation. We're putting up questions out on there regularly, and so we would love to get your answers, get your feedback, hear your takes, and see what you guys think about the show.
So, Rob, I'm out in Washington. This episode, by the way, is completely over Skype, so you probably notice a little bit of audio difference. We'll be back in the studio next week. But I'm out in Washington State on business, Rob. And you know what, Rob? I can't think of anything in life that sucks worse than jet lag.
Agreed.
You're on a plane for like 4 hours. You get out to the West Coast. You're waking up at weird hours because it's like 7 your time, so it's 4 a.m. here. It's just rough. And then you get to 10 o'clock at night. You still have business meetings, and it's actually 1 a.m. back home. It is a rough existence, Rob. But you know what has helped me out this week?
Jim Beam?
Close. Close. That has done wonders for getting to sleep at 4 a.m. No,
could it be? Could it be Strike Force Energy?
Yes. Strike Force Energy. Our veteran friends at Strike Force Energy have brought us a really great product that just is able to keep us energized with zero crash, Jeremiah. And it is great. And this episode, as well as the first episodes, have been brought to you by our friends at Strike Force Energy. And Jeremiah, if everyone in our audience, of course, they want to have this Strike Force Energy because they want to have a lot of energy with zero crash, where can they find this good stuff?
So you can find Strike Force Energy at strikeforceenergy.com. And we've got a coupon code, a promo code that you can use to get 20% off all your orders. So if you type in the coupon code MAP for Money and Power, that's MAP at strikeforceenergy.com, you can get 20% off of all your orders. So the Strike Force, it comes in a nice little tin pouch. It's a concentrated liquid that you can add to any beverage. One pack can equal a 16 or 20 ounce bottle of water, depending on how you want the combination to taste. But they also have pump bottles, so you can get, instead of getting one serving in a tin pouch, you can get 100 servings in a pump bottle. And so my wife and I use that at home. It's a great. The great thing about it is my wife likes it a little bit more diluted than I like it. I like it pretty strong, and so she can do one pump, and I can do 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how annoyed I am with the kids that day. But
you can quad shot that,
or just squirt it straight into my mouth. However I need to. I'm just waiting for the IV. The IV bag version. They said they're working on that, but yeah. So there's a couple different ways to get it. Get it in individual servings, in a tin pouch. You can get a 10-pack of that online, or you can get a pump bottle. I definitely encourage our listeners to try it out and use coupon code MAP while they're at it for 20% off
at strikeforceenergy.com. All right, great.
That's right.
All right, listener feedback.
Yeah, not a lot in the ways of feedback. Well, I shouldn't say that. We've got got some different topics that have been suggested. We did talk about Tony's today. A couple other topics will be on the docket in future episodes. But yeah, as far as general feedback, a little slim this week. So we'd love, like I said, we'd love to hear from our listeners at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and love to hear from you.
All right. And we haven't heard from Rob's mom either, so we're expecting some voicemails from that. So hopefully, Rob, make sure you tell her to call in.
She is
All right.
She is much more pleased with the show because of my lack of cursing now. So she is very happy.
Good. All right.
Actually, Rob figured out a way to like block her IP address from subscribing, and so when she goes to the website, her IP address just automatically redirects to the Joel Osteen podcast.
Exactly.
So she just loves it. She doesn't.
Yeah, so she's like, Rob's all about telling me about my best life now, and this is amazing. And you know what? My son sounds awfully like Joel Osteen. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, she doesn't know if she thinks I've turned into a con artist, and I think that's just because she's listening to Joel Osteen. So.
All right. Wow. All right. So we're gonna wrap up here, like we always do. Parting shots. All right, Jeremiah.
Yeah. So I'm going to use a specific tweet as an example, but this is more of a frustration. Just kind of generally speaking, and so one of my friends posted on Facebook, and they posted a screenshot of Pope Francis's tweet. He recently said, "quote: Do we really want peace? Then let's ban all weapons, so we don't have to live in fear of war." End quote. And so that, first of all, I think that that's a ridiculous statement. But I'm actually
narrator. Cain used a rock.
Yes. So actually, believe it or not, I'm actually not speaking to that tweet specifically. And but it just made me think of just a general point of frustration for me, specifically on Facebook. And this is when people take screenshots of tweets and post them on Facebook. I don't have an issue with that inherently, but when you're using it as an example of something, or when you're saying, hey, what President Trump said is ridiculous, or what Pope Francis said, this is ridiculous. It's been frustrating for me because then I have to go search out for that tweet to confirm its veracity. It would be so much easier if people would just post a link to the tweet. Or if you want to get really fancy, post a screenshot so then people can see it, but then also post a link to the tweet so that I don't have to go from Facebook over to Twitter to find this tweet that may or may not have actually occurred, because there's so much fake junk being spread on Facebook. And so you actually have – go ahead.
You know, it would be a lot easier, Jeremiah, if you would just blindly accept what they posted instead of doing fact checks and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, I could just unleash my rage machine every time I see a quote that doesn't agree with my worldview, and just slam it without ever realizing that. Oops, wait, that was actually an article from the Babylon Bee. Not that again.
Do you know what I do? Anytime I see someone screenshot a tweet, I go up to the right corner of their little box, and I click on it, and then I press snooze for 30 days. And then if I see it again after 30 days, I just delete them. Works out super well, and my friends list is diminishing quickly.
Yeah, so I won't make any comments about how Rob Talks Money posts at Rob Talks Finance tweets to Facebook. I won't mention that, Rob.
It's true. I snooze myself, so it's
Yeah.
it's going to be a vicious circle around the Johnson household.
He actually hasn't seen anything his wife has posted ever, so he's missing a lot of kid photos that he's actually tagged in. It's odd.
He actually forgets he has kids. He's like, I haven't seen pictures of them. They must not exist.
Now Facebook is like, are you sure you want to keep blocking your wife? It's like, why not?
Yeah, it's worked out for the first couple years of marriage. We'll continue.
Right?
All right, Rob, your parting shot.
Sure. So on Saturday, they had the White House Correspondence Dinner, which is the media's giant pat on the back for how wonderful they are and how, what super of an organization they are, these White House correspondents. So I'm going to play a clip and then I'm going to respond to it.
Mike Pence is also very anti-choice. He thinks abortion is murder, which, first of all, don't knock it till you try it. And when you do try it, really knock it. You got to get that baby out of there. And yeah, sure, you can groan all you want. I know a lot of you are very anti-abortion, unless it's the one you got for your secret mistress. It's fun how values can waver. But good for you.
So first of all, it sounds like Gilbert Gottfried got clipped, and now he's doing stand-up comedy as a female. So a couple of things. The first thing is, regardless of what side you're on, things like this do a disservice to discourse on the topic of pro-life and pro-choice. If you watch the video of that clip, the majority of the room is noticeably uncomfortable. There's a few tables, I think it might have been MSNBC, who were, just slapping their knee. It was the funniest thing they ever heard, but what do you expect from them? But honestly, it's things like this that irritate me. And I love stand-up comedy. I watch a lot of stand-up comedy. I love the jokes on the left, the right. But things like this, they're just not funny. And I know comedy is subjective, but this does very little to advance even from a comedic standpoint, to advance a topic. And I think Dave Chappelle has done a tremendous job in this when he uses politics in his comedy to actually bring light to topics. He knows how to do it really well. This lady, Michelle Wolf, who writes for the Daily Show, which explains why unfunny she is, it doesn't do anything in her entire 20-minute set of any value, in my opinion. And I guess the parting shot is just stop it. Just stop doing stand-up comedy. Stop writing. Terrible, terrible job.
Wow. All right, so I have some thoughts. Normally we don't respond to parting shots, but I'm going to respond to the parting shot here. So if she had that in her Netflix special, which I guess is coming up.
Are you serious?
You would. Yeah, she has a Netflix special coming up. But anyways, I think so. At least that's what I read on the internet. So if it was in the Netflix special and you watched it, would you have had the same problem with the material, or was it simply because of the setting and like her poking fun at certain people in the room?
I would have had the exact same reaction, because it's not about the people in the room. Even when she was going after like Sarah Sanders or Mike Pence, not a big deal. It's comedy. You take a shot. This and jokes like that have always rubbed me super wrong. So whether it was on Netflix, if I was watching it at the club, or at the White House Correspondence Dinner, it would have been the same response across the board. Yeah,
I'm not a big fan of abortion jokes. So if you take out that
hot take there, Nathan.
Right?
Hot take.
I'm bringing the hot takes, but here is a hot take. If you take out that section, I actually thought some of her stuff was funny. I didn't agree with it, obviously, because I'm a conservative, but I didn't see it as inflammatory. She went after the media a little bit too. I think that's actually why she's going to be forced to apologize and stuff. It's because she went after the media and accused them of like basically making money off of Trump. And that she kind of crossed the line with them. So I didn't find it as bad. I think the setting is a little bit different, and demands a certain amount of. It's the White House Correspondence Dinner is just difficult to do well, because of that. Because you kind of have to. It's not like you're not at the local comedy club doing a local stand-up bit. There is a certain amount of dignity that has to go into it and still be funny. It's a difficult line to do, so I don't envy any comedian who has to do it. But I don't know. Besides that clip, I didn't have as much of an issue with it as other people did. And so that's my hot take.
And I think,
and I know I'm in the minority there, but.
Well, no, I think jokes like this, and I agree, the White House Correspondence Dinner isn't exactly the best place for stand up, and no one that I've seen has done it particularly well. The problem that I've had is that I relate abortion jokes to Holocaust jokes or jokes that people throw down after like mass shootings, like Dane Cook, things like that are just to me objectively distasteful. I mean, there's almost 1 million children who are killed every year through abortion, so it's an active, ongoing Holocaust in my mind, and I know a lot of others as well. So anytime someone takes an opportunity to make light of such a serious situation, really makes me angry. And the rest of her set was fine. I thought it was, again, objectively unfunny. I didn't laugh once, and this joke was towards the end of her set. I didn't think she was funny at all. Her delivery was terrible. Her timing was way off. I didn't like her as a comedian at all. But that's not to say the other stuff that she talked about she shouldn't have said. I mean, that's fine. Again, going after Sanders or Pence or Trump, that's fine. Or Trump's wealth or whatever, that's fine. But when someone goes to the position where, all right, now we're actively going to start making fun and poking at children who are being ripped from the womb and killed, then I start to have an issue with the material.
And I don't disagree. Hey, she did throw you a bone about Flint not having clean water, though.
She did at the end. That was kind of like hey, let's get every white Republican in the room to agree with me before I head off the stage, because they're still taking it on the chin for that. Yeah. So it was the proverbial dumpster fire. I didn't like it at all, as if you couldn't tell.
Fair. All right. So my parting shot this week, I am going to do a recommendation. So good friends of mine have a book. Brett Kunkel and John Stonestreet have a great book called A Practical Guide to Culture. And it's available everywhere the books are sold. If you have children, especially if you have children who are preteens and getting into the teenage years, this book is a must-read book, period. I think it's a must-read book, period, but especially if you have children who are in that preteen teens. It goes through, it's basically a practical guide to helping the next generation navigate today's world. It is phenomenal, and John and Brett just have a solid heart when it comes to both apologetics and also being missionaries in the culture that we have. So they are phenomenal men of God, and it is a phenomenal book, and go out and support them. And Brett or John, if you are listening, you can send the check to my home. So, but no, it's great. Definitely well worth the read. Jeremiah, have you had a chance to read it yet?
I'm actually about partway through it. It's been on my to read list for a little bit. It's on my nightstand, and so I'm about partway through. But I completely second everything that you've said. Both John and Brett are two people that hey, maybe we'll get a chance to get them on the podcast sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brett and John, we love you, I guess, since that's my parting shots. Usually I hate you. We'll do, and I love you.
But
There
not
you are.
today. Yeah, not
All
today.
right.
I was going to say, kind of a light parting shots today. I didn't hear anyone, flat out say, hey, I didn't say I hated the Pope, and well, I mean, I guess, you had a really hot take about hating abortion jokes. So, I mean, there's that. But
Yeah. I stepped out on a limb there.
you never know with our listenership. That might be a branch too far, Nathan.
It might be. I don't know. Well, if that's a problem with our listenership, I think we need new listenership. So I think
Tony Vance.
Yeah, Tony Vance and Kevin
pure.
Small. If you have a problem with us hating abortion jokes, then you go find another podcast now. Right this minute.
I like that the number of people on our podcast exceeds the number of listeners we have.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Need to work on that.
Oh, sad.
No, I'm just playing.
It is sad. All right. So that's going to be it for this week. For Rob Johnson and Jeremiah Martin, I am Nathan Martin, and thank you very much for listening to this week's Money and Power.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on?